Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org.
This week on Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke, we spotlight guest Flannery O'Neil, who suffered a stroke in 2017 and has since devoted her life to the stroke community, serving as a support group facilitator and the COO of Stroke Onward, an organization dedicated to helping stroke survivors rebuild their identities in recovery. Flannery discusses the shock of suffering a stroke at age 34 while living in a small, active Colorado town. She also shares challenges of both visible and invisible disabilities. Flannery's story is entitled The Power of Listening. Thank you for joining us for Part 2, Flannery O'Neil's interview. Hello and welcome to Beyond Stillness. Stroke offers a powerful, life-changing shift in perspective. Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. This radio show, Beyond Stillness, offers an hour of pause for storytelling and reflection. Ultimately, Beyond Stillness is a welcoming environment that reveres the moment beyond stroke's paralysis. Still moments unite humanity and divinity. I'm your host, Molly Bucola. This week, we welcome guest Flannery O'Neil, who loves the outdoors, hiking, and gardening. She spends downtime with her husband and her Boston Terrier mix, Disco. Flannery worked in public health before her stroke in 2017, then was forced to stop and reevaluate her direction. Flannery finds strength and purpose in supporting fellow stroke survivors. Her story is entitled The Power of Listening. And for our moment of pause, we'll do just that, allowing ourselves to settle into this moment. Maybe bringing awareness to the breath or the body in this place. Creating space within our bodies, within our minds, and in our lives. Space to be and space to listen. Today we listen especially to things that may not be said. We listen to our emotions. We listen to that small, still voice within. And with this space, in this space, we ask for courage in order to use our lives to serve others and to be our best selves. And we give thanks. Good morning, Flannery.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
Flannery, you were a driven professional before your stroke, and at a young age, you had climbed the professional ladder and relied on self-control, hard work, and determination. You grew accustomed to navigating predictable situations and controlling your outcomes. Stroke survivors often redefine their relationship with control after their strokes. Please speak to your post-stroke relationship with control. What was it like after your stroke, and how has it morphed through your recovery?
I think this is such a great question. My stroke, it just helped me realize that there's so little in our control, right? I talk about how I was young, I was healthy, I had no indicators that would say, hey, you need to watch out, you might, something serious could happen. And it is so important to take care of our bodies and keep ourselves in the best shape and be fit and active and eat healthy. And at the same time, things can just happen. And so that was a huge life lesson for me, is that there is so little control that we have. And how do I just let go to this holding on that I had, the control that I had? So this was a huge learning of release and just do what I can do. And then whatever is going to happen, I'm just going to ride that wave with whatever happens. But there was still lots of gripping on to that, even after my stroke. Well, if I Google this and Google that, like the answers are going to be present, and they're not present. Any one of us that had sought out information from Dr. Google, some information there, but it's not detailed, and it's not detailed to your specific experience. And that's where community comes into play. And that's where a good healthcare team comes into play to help understand your specific space, but also just do what you can and then release the rest of it to what it's going to be.
That's really good life advice.
A hard way to learn that, right?
It's so hard. And you learned it so young. When I sit with people who have gone through a lot of life experience, I love listening to ways that they have learned to live. And you learned and are continuing to learn that lesson so young.
Yeah. And I think I keep learning it over and over. My stroke was before COVID, and I had to learn this all over again in COVID. COVID was just challenging for me because my blood clotting disorder makes me more likely to have another stroke. So learning to live in this space where you don't have the control, you take the medication and you follow all the instructions, but I can have another stroke at any time. So when COVID hit and they were talked about some of the consequences of being infected with COVID, one of them is a propensity towards blood clotting. And so that just ramped up all of that anxiety that I had to a new level. And so learning how to take care of myself and make sure that I feel safe and also live in the world, that was a new road I had to go down again. This is not like, oh, I learned this lesson, check, move on. It's lifelong learning.
In your story, you mentioned fear, and it sounds like there's always a thought that a stroke might happen again. And you were talking about managing that. What are your other strategies for managing fear in light of your recovery?
Some of the things that we do every day, right? Making sure that we get movement in our day, making sure, like we started the podcast off with a moment of pause, giving yourself time to center in today instead of going back into the past and worrying about what happened in the past, or if I had done this or if I had done that, maybe this wouldn't have happened. And then trying to write what's going to happen in the future. Again, we don't know. We're going to do our best to have things go the way we would like to, but that we don't know what the future holds. And so a survivor early on in my recovery reminded me about the importance of checking in with myself. How am I today? What do I need to do today? Because that's within our sphere of control, right?
Yeah.
Learning how to center in that is what has helped me be able to navigate through the worry and the fear that comes for those of us whose strokes are ones that could happen again. That's not every stroke, but some of us do have underlying medical conditions that could happen again.
Mm.
And on the days where the worry is more present, that's when I lean into my community and lean into my peers and just say, I need help today. I'm having a rough day today and I just need to reach out for support.
So in a way, what you're saying is when you encounter fear, you actually call in that idea about control.
Mm-hmm.
You release things that you cannot control.
Mm-hmm.
You practice the things that you can, which includes calling in a community, asking for help, but also reminding yourself of specific things that you can do in your own day to take control of that. And I love the part that you said about writing your future, whether it be thinking about the best case scenario or writing it down or somehow looking towards the future and what could be in a beautiful way.
Yeah. And instead of worrying what could go wrong, what could go right? Right?
Ooh, I love it. Not what can go wrong. There are a couple of things that I want to take from today already. One, not what can go wrong, but what can go right.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of listening. I love that you entitled your talk, The Power of Listening. There's so much to that.
Yeah. Listening internal, listening external. There's so much in that.
So much. Yeah, that could be a mantra for every single day of our lives.
Yeah.
In your story, you said that you struggle with invisible disabilities and probably always will. Can you describe the invisible disabilities that you manage at this point and how you do so?
Fatigue, which is super common for people after stroke. And certainly the fatigue that I have now 7 years later is very different and much less than what I had immediately after my stroke. But it is still something every day that, and as I look, what do I want to do today? What do I want to be able to do this week that I have to negotiate around? If I want to do X, Y, and Z, I really need to pace myself and be mindful about that because I still have that neuro fatigue from stroke. My aphasia, so you might hear me stumble around with my words, or even when I write, I find myself using the same words frequently within a short amount of time in a paragraph or within a page. I'll find the same word multiple times. And so I always write and then go back. Okay, and now get my thesaurus out, whether that is my own thesaurus or often the online thesaurus, have some variety in my language. And same with numbers, just focusing a lot of attention when somebody's giving me a phone number or an address, or I have a string of numbers. I just have to really focus in on that. I can't really multitask anymore. And so that, especially as I think about numbers, I really have to be intentional there. And I still don't feel very well on the right side of my body. So I have to put my left hand in the faucet to make sure that the water is not going to burn me. And it's hard to type on my computer, and even things that you never realized you used that sort of sensation, like riding your bike. The wind feels different on your left side than your right side. So it's making sure that you're balanced appropriately in all the things that you do. Those are a few of the challenges and day in and day out of the invisible disabilities that I have.
It sounds like since day one, you've given yourself your own little games and challenges in order to better your brain and your body. You mentioned laying in the bed in the hospital, trying to come up with the words. Another part was specifically trying to come up with 5 words that start with B, just in your mind as you're sitting in a meeting. And I like that you continue to strengthen those muscles in your brain, because as we know, we have neuroplasticity, and little by little, we are able to develop those pathways.
Exactly. Neuroplasticity is so important because we just get better and better and better. I see it all the time when I meet with people in support groups, meet with people one-on-one. Their stories of resilience, their stories of recovery. It's really inspiring to see how that has looked for them. And when I think about my own journey, just how challenging reading, writing, speaking was, doing math in those first days versus now, it's night and day. And it's still a challenge, but it's so much easier, and it just continues to get easier, especially as we keep trying. So when I left speech therapy, I asked, do I need exercises? And they're like, no, you're going back to work. You're going to be challenging yourself on a daily basis. That's enough exercise. But if you don't have that kind of stimulation, then there are lots of great apps out there and tools so that you can continue that work even outside of the therapist's office.
Apps. Do you have any off the top of your head that you would suggest?
Yeah, so the one that I used, it was recommended to me in the hospital, is called Constant Therapy. And it is a paid app, but they do an assessment to see what your status is and then recommend exercises tailored specific to you. So I use that app in concert with in-person speech therapy. And I credit that to how I was able to recover so quickly. When I wasn't in the therapist's office and I wasn't napping, I was on the app just trying to do as much as I could.
Wow. And you said that you were living in a small town in Colorado right after, and they didn't have as many resources in that small town.
Exactly.
So you were able to download that app and work through that app.
Exactly.
Wow, Flannery. You were talking about invisible disabilities, and you work with stroke survivors often, and many stroke survivors have visible disabilities. I'm wondering what your thoughts and emotions are around living with invisible disabilities while also working with people who have visible disabilities.
Right after my stroke, I just felt like I had a tattoo on my forehead that said stroke, and everyone knew what had happened to me and what was going on. And that was not the case. It was not the case until at least till I started opening my mouth. And then they were like, what's going on? I think it's easier and harder on both sides in one respect. Not to say that it's easy, but it's easier when there is a physical disability that you can see. So people automatically have compassion for you versus those of us with invisible disabilities. It's not seen until you try to talk or you try to operate in the wide world out there, and you can't operate the way that the world that is not set up for those of us with disabilities to live easily in. Even though so many people at one time or another in their life are going to be touched by disability in some shape or form, the infrastructure around us is not built for us. But it gives me so much compassion if I know what my struggles are when I meet with people, to lead with compassion and lead with grace and empathy instead of having some other set of expectations that we never know what other people are going through. Maybe we can see some of what they're going through, but that's just the tip of the iceberg. What's beneath the surface for all of us is so much more complicated, complex, and beautiful. And we need to give each other time to learn more about that instead of making assessments and judgments just on what we see face to face.
And you facilitate some support groups. I'm wondering, have you talked about this in a group setting with both people who carry invisible disabilities and people with visible disabilities? How has that conversation gone?
I've had that mostly in an aphasia support group, talked about the difference of having aphasia versus not having aphasia. Like for me, I can mostly present as though I don't have aphasia. There are other people where they can't speak at all. You know, they have a card that tells people that they have aphasia. And so it is quickly apparent that what is invisible is also visible. I think you just learn how to walk through the world, and it can be frustrating. It can be humbling, embarrassing, all of the words, but you just make it work for you and make it work for people around you. And a simple thing and a point of frustration for me in navigating this invisible disability was that when I was struggling to find words, people around me would say, oh, well, I have that too. I can't find words. And I appreciate that. And I appreciate you're trying to make me feel better, but it actually is minimizing the experience that I'm having. And what is very different than when you can't find a word without having a brain injury. And so I had to work to find the language to advocate for myself and just say, thank you for trying to be supportive, but also I need you to know that this is more than that.
That takes courage to have that conversation, because the person who's talking with you is trying to be nice and trying to make it easy. But also, this is a situation that we can't just sweep aside.
Right. Sometimes I don't feel authentic in this. Okay, I had a moderate sized stroke. I have aphasia too, and I consider myself still having aphasia, although there are people with much more severe aphasia than me. But our experiences are valid, and we have the opportunity. There are some people that don't have a voice, an actual voice, or they don't have a voice for other reasons after their stroke. So I think that's one of my driving passions in this, is that I was able to regain my voice, and I need to use that not only to talk about my experience, but to talk about lots of other people's experience and to give voice to the breadth of the stroke experience. But it is hard sometimes, especially when I meet it with an aphasia group. My appearance is that I speak without any challenge, but often in that group I start with, hey, I've had a stroke. I'm just a peer. And also, you may think that I am speaking freely and easily, but I have a long outline that I use. It is right on the side of me next to my computer, or when I am meeting in person with people, I've got notes. I have spent time preparing for this because I can't just do this off the cuff like I used.
Thank you, Flannery. Every experience is valid. Yeah, it's important to share our experiences, and no stroke is the same. No person is the same. Every story is valid, and we're all on a different journey together.
Right. And the severity of your stroke, whether that is a mild stroke to a very severe stroke, is impactful in our lives, and that it is worthy of care. It's worthy of attention. It's worthy of healing. And it is a journey to recover, even if you had the most mild of strokes all the way to the most severe of strokes. It leaves an impact, and it's worth putting care and attention to it.
Absolutely. Shifting gears here. In your story, you described a perspective shifting day at the ropes course. Please describe that day and why you feel it was so impactful. What was transformational about that moment?
Like I said, I lived in the mountains in Colorado. It's a very active community. I had been used to hiking, riding my bike, doing all of these activities, boating. And I had, by that time, this was 6 months into the stroke, and it was the middle of the summer. I was back to doing a lot of my activities, although slower and a different pace that I did before. But I was able to move my body fairly similarly to what I had done before. So I get out on that course. I had just met this group of people that were going to be with my teammates for this 6 to 8 month long leadership training. And of course, we all want to put the brave, confident face on and like get up and be able to do this scary thing. And I'm just staring up at the tree. Okay, I can do this. Kept myself up so much, and then to just be cut down. I mean, like, nope, you can't do this. You can't do this because your stroke says no. That was the first time, I think, in that preceding 6 months that I was like, you can't do this. This is a hard stop. And to me, I just thought I had recovered so much, and I was like out in the world again, and it just hit me like a ton of bricks. Just started crying, and just was really grateful for the people that were with me that day that took me into a big hug and helped me process that. There's another moment later in the day where they have a pole that you climb up in a climbing harness. So you're supposed to climb all the way to the top of this pole, stand on the top, and then jump off. So I climbed up. I didn't get all the way to the top, but I was able to get to almost to the top and then jump off. No problem. I was fine. But I had another colleague who got all the way to the top, was standing on the pole and just frozen in place. She knew what she needed to do, take that leap of faith, but she just wasn't ready to do it. And all she said over and over at the top was, transitions are hard, transitions are hard. And she just kept saying that until finally she just took that leap and jumped off. But that transitions are hard seared into my brain. I remember that in these challenging times too. Transitions are hard. That was spot on. And you can do it and take that next step. And not all of us have to leap off of a pole. But she did that with the support of her team below her climbing harness. She had all of her safety apparatus. And of course, that is the point of that activity. But to have that mantra has been very meaningful as I walk through things and transitions in my life that are challenging.
So many parallels there at the ropes course with recovery. I think we all have those moments that all of a sudden are a hard stop. For you, it was, you can't do this part of the ropes course. For other people, it's you can't go back to work yet, or you can't drive yet, or you can't, whatever it is. All of a sudden having someone else tell us what we can and can't do can be demoralizing. It can be depressing. It can be all of these heavy emotions. Because for so much of this, we put in a lot of hard work, and then little by little, the hope is that we see progression. And for someone else to stop that, it's hard.
Yeah.
And transitions are hard, but it doesn't mean that it's a hard stop for life.
Exactly.
A lot of times when we receive a hard stop, we need to figure out how to pivot in order to go a different way forward.
Yeah.
A hard stop might be a hard stop for one thing, but there's a way around. There will be other things that we can do.
Absolutely. Yeah. Healing is not linear, right? It's not that today is better than yesterday and onward and onward. There are peaks and there are valleys. You've seen a visual as like a heartbeat. There's just ups and downs. It can be 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or more than that. And that can be so demoralizing. But after you go through it a little bit of time, whether that is your physical recovery, in my support group, we talk so much about understanding the life is like an ocean. Some days it is smooth sailing, and some days the water is so choppy you don't think you're going to make it through. But part of what is important on those choppy days is reflecting back on those days when it's calm and knowing the sea too will get back to calm. And that has been helpful for me as I navigate through this ongoing recovery, even 7 years later.
Rough waters, and then those days that we're just floating in the inner tube.
Exactly.
Thanks, Flannery. In your story, you asked, how would I ever be able to get back to me? Because certainly this is not me. You said, I was struggling to reconcile my identity, this new me, with who I was just days before. This part of your story reminded me of Stroke Onward's mission. What steps have you taken to rebuild your identity while also finding purpose after your stroke?
Identity is not a monolith. We're made up of so many different parts. So that was so helpful for me as I struggled to reconcile. Would I go back to work? What would my relationship with my husband be like? What would it be like with family, with friends? Baby steps of what are the things that are important to me and why. I had a great social life and spent lots of time in recreation, but a lot of my time at that point in my life was focused on work. And that was very meaningful to me, but also very stressful. And I think that was part of why I had my stroke. And so I had to really reevaluate, if I have fatigue and I want to stay healthy, can I really put this much time and energy into work? And do I really want to do that? I just got a big lesson that life is really fragile. So how do I want to go forward? And so that was one of my key takeaways, is giving myself the space. Generally, I'm going to work my 9 to 5, and then I'm going to say, okay, I've done what I can do there. And now I have time for the other things that I want to have in my life. In the introduction, you talked about gardening. I never really did much gardening before my stroke, but it has become such a beautiful place of learning something completely different, getting your hands in the dirt. And there's something so healing about that. You can go have a relationship with other people. I work in a community garden, and we just talk about whatever is going on around in the community around us. It's not about work. It's not about anything serious. We're planting seeds and seeing what happens. And it's been lots of fun.
Planting seeds and seeing what happens. Mm-hmm. You've done that in a lot of areas of your recovery. Mm-hmm. That's another place to find community, a community garden.
For people with aphasia, it is really challenging to maintain relationships when speaking, and the way that you related to people before is gone. So that is something that we talk about a lot in my aphasia group. What are places that you can go and engage with people where you don't have to speak as much? And I always recommend gardening. I think that is a nice thing to do, because you can be outside, you can be moving your body. There are ways to adapt gardening to your specific abilities and be with people. But often me and my principal garden friend and I, we talk, we have a plan, and then off we go, working together, but we're not necessarily talking all the time. So it's a really nice way to be in community with people without having to feel like you have to have long conversations.
That's a great idea. Community garden. You've connected with many stroke survivors over the years. Please tell us about one who has been particularly inspiring for you and your recovery. Actually, I'm going to say 2, because my guess is you'll probably talk about Deborah, because you work with her often. So tell us about Deborah, and then also tell us about one other person who's been very inspiring for you.
I feel so fortunate. I've had the opportunity to meet so many incredible people whose lives have been touched by stroke, just like me. And I often welcome people into this club, the club that none of us wanted to be joining. But fortunately, there's a beautiful community here to support people. Two people that I just feel so fortunate to have gotten to know. Both are through my work with Stroke Onward. The first one, like you mentioned, is Deborah Meyerson. She is one of the co-founders of Stroke Onward, an incredibly talented, intelligent, loving woman who had a severe stroke about 13 years ago that left her with really challenging aphasia. She's got some physical challenges, but the principal challenge for her is her aphasia. Before her stroke, she was a tenured professor at Stanford University, really just at the peak of her career. She had an incredible partner, 3 great kids, and in a blink of an eye, everything has changed. And before her stroke, she was an identity researcher, so knew deeply about identity and the impacts, context, all these different aspects of identity. And then here she is, unable to speak, and her identity just completely shifted. So she spent years trying to recover and was not able to get back to her professorship at Stanford. And that really triggered her identity crisis and led to her writing a book called Identity Theft that actually speaks about the identity experience for survivors. And I think that is the first time that in a book form, it is detailed just what identity and the shift and the change that happens to our identities after stroke. So it's her work on that. And I am so grateful that she put in the time and energy. It took her and her supporters 5 years to write this book because of her aphasia and research that needed to be done. And fortunately for us, we now have this incredible book. And that's what led to the organization being formed. Really impacted by that. Because I didn't call what I was going through an identity, any sort of identity work, until I read her book years after my stroke. And I was like, oh, yes, that's exactly what I just went through. But I never once said, oh, my identity has been impacted. I'm just so grateful that the people that come after us have the benefit of our experiences and her experience to start their recovery in that aspect much sooner than those of us before the book.
I had the same reaction when I read the book. It gives us a vocabulary. It's like, yes, that's exactly what we've all been tiptoeing around, but she nailed it. It's a very powerful read. Hub Miller, a guest from about a month ago, mentioned that in one of our interviews, that reading Identity Theft was transformative for him.
Yeah, it's a really incredible book. And also recognizing that reading for people after stroke can be challenging. There is an audiobook, and we also have other shorter versions, kind of like the Cliff Notes. I don't know if Cliff Notes is still a thing. The shortened chapter highlights. If reading a book sounds overwhelming, there are other ways to access that information, that content.
Absolutely. Will you tell us about your second inspiring stroke survivor?
I met a young woman, Caitlin, about a week into starting my work with Stroke Onward, and she was a guest speaker at an event where Deborah and her husband, Steve, were talking. And she started talking, and immediately I was like, I have to get to know this young woman. And she had a really challenging stroke story. As she was out riding on one of those rental scooters that you see everywhere. She and a friend were driving those. She was riding on the back. I think they're really only meant to be for one person. So there were 2 of them on there. She fell off the back of it and hit her head, but thought she was fine. And then like 2 days later, there was a slight tear in her carotid, and that caused a clot that ended up causing a fairly significant stroke that left her at a young age with pretty debilitating aphasia. And she was in recovery and just was getting more and more depressed. Her identity had shifted so much. Her life circumstances had just changed so much. She was living with her sister, completely reliant on someone else, and it just put her into such a deep depression that she became suicidal and actually took action and tried to complete suicide. Unfortunately, was with family members, and they found her before she was successful. And so she had to go through a really intensive recovery, and she was still in that recovery when I first met her, but she was out there talking about her experience and raising awareness about what that looks like for people. And I was just in awe of this woman as part of her journey. I mean, she continued with her speech therapy along with, of course, she was in intensive mental health recovery at that time. But since then, her speech has started to come back. She's an occupational therapist. She helps me lead a support group specifically for people with aphasia. She's this incredibly inspirational young woman and is moving forward and owning what happened and sharing her experience so that others can know the depth of the challenges and the depth of the pain that can come after stroke. But there's so much hope in this recovery and so much help in peer support and just connecting with other people and connecting with the resources that you need to support yourself. And we don't have to struggle in silence. There's medication that can help. There is talking that can help. There's so much out there to support our recoveries.
Flannery, Caitlin sounds like a huge inspiration. She is now using her voice to raise awareness and to facilitate community. And I see that in what you've done with your experience also. You have taken this moment in time, and through your recovery, you're still recovering. Through your recovery, you've chosen to raise awareness, to help change a system, to create community. You also facilitate support groups. Are you willing to share a description of each of the groups that you facilitate and how our listeners could join?
Yes, I lead 2 groups. The first one is called Virtual Connections, and this is a truly incredible community. And it is a project of 2 organizations. One is called Graphica, that provides assistive communication tools for people that live with aphasia. And the other is a nonprofit called Aphasia Recovery Connection. And together they created this platform called Virtual Connections. And Virtual Connections is an online space. It is daily Zoom calls for people with aphasia on all different topics. So there's more than 6,000 people that are on this platform that join these daily calls. Caitlin, who I just mentioned, and I lead a session on Virtual Connections called Rebuilding Identity. You can go check us out there, but also so many other sessions. And most of the sessions are led by speech language pathologists or speech language students. And there are a few that are led by peers like myself and Caitlin. But just a really supportive community of people living life with aphasia, all different ages, from all different countries, all different experiences there to support one another through recovery and healing with aphasia.
Wow, what a wonderful resource.
So that's the first one. And I just think the world of this group. And so I love to share about that. And then I have a group that I founded with another survivor, and it's called Young and Young at Heart. So we are a young survivors support group, although there is no age range. Anyone is welcome. And we've got people ranging from 20 to 75. So it is self-identified Young and Young at Heart. We meet on the 3rd Thursday of every month on Zoom. It's in the evening. So it is 8 p.m. Eastern time, 5 p.m. Pacific time. And we talk about all sorts of different topics. We talk about the emotional side of things. Driving has been a big topic this year. And so in a couple of months, we're going to have an occupational therapist come and talk to us about getting back to driving. So we have all sorts of different topics that we cover in that group and would love to have anyone join us.
Young and Young at Heart. Wow, I love that. That sounds like a fun group to be a part of. And Virtual Connections, that sounds like a very good resource, specifically for those who manage aphasia in their daily life.
For Virtual Connections, they also have sessions for caregivers or care partners of people with aphasia. So there's also support and connection for those people as well. It takes a village. It's a family or it's a community impact when someone has a stroke. Support is also needed for those that are there supporting us as we heal.
Absolutely. Flannery, thank you for taking so much time over the past month or so to craft your story for our listeners.
Thank you so much, Molly. I really appreciate the platform, the opportunity to dig in a little bit deeper and to do that with a fellow survivor. I feel like I lost so much control and power, but we've regained that, and to be able to do that together with another survivor and just show what our abilities are and that we have so much to give and share has brought me so much joy in this process. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Flannery. We'll close with a moment of pause, slowing down in this moment. Flannery spoke about an opportunity to slow down, an opportunity to shift our perspective on life, an opportunity to grow in new ways, an opportunity to create community, and an opportunity to listen. Today, we are grateful for opportunities that sometimes may appear as challenges. Grant us a creative mind and a courageous spirit to take a leap in order to transform, to redirect, and to rewrite our futures. Today we pause to listen for a new way forward, to listen to that still small voice, and to listen to our bodies that are unique and uniquely inspired. And we give thanks. Thank you for devoting time and space to listen to Part 2, Flannery O'Neil's interview. For the full story, please listen to Part 1, Flannery O'Neil's story. Each colorful memory creates a parable for life's greater teachings, a compass for journeys ahead, and inspired wisdom for unique growth. In this episode of Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke, we heard from guest Flannery O'Neil, who suffered a stroke in 2017 at the age of 34. Flannery shared ways she found support, inspiration, and community while discovering balance and purpose post-stroke. Again, thanks for listening. And remember, as part of the stroke community, you are more than supportive. You are inspirational.
If you are part of the stroke community and have a story you'd like to share on the show, please contact us. Email molly@beyondstillness.org.
Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke is made possible by our guests and tax-deductible donations from friends and listeners like you. Join us in empowering stroke survivors with stories of wisdom, purpose, connection, and hope at www.beyondstillness.org. Another way to support is to like, share, or subscribe to our weekly show. Again, thank you for devoting time and space for this week's episode of Beyond Stillness, Stories After Stroke.